Welcome to the Secrets to Mindful Health, where we explore the hidden truths of wellness in all its forms. From physical and mental health to spirituality, join me, your host, Beth Warren, at Nourished by Beth on Instagram and TikTok, registered dietitian for over a decade, and single mom of 6, as I share my personal journey overcoming challenges towards self-love and wellness. Together with my guests, we will inspire and motivate you to prioritize your well-being and create a life of balance and fulfillment. Let's embark on a transformative journey towards a healthier, happier you. I'm glad you're here.
In this episode, Reclaiming Your Unicorn Space, a journey to empowerment and self-care, we will explore how to spearhead important conversations about fair play in the home, create your own unicorn space, and support moms and caregivers in reclaiming their best selves. I'm joined by Eve Rodsky, who transformed a quote blueberries breakdown into a catalyst for social change when she applied her Harvard trained background in organizational management to ask the simple yet profound question: what would happen if we treated our homes as our most important organizations? Her New York Times bestselling book and Reese's Book Club pick, Fair Play, a gamified life management system that helps partners rebalance their domestic workload and reimagine their relationship, has elevated the cultural conversation about the value of unpaid labor and care. In her highly anticipated follow-up, Find Your Unicorn Space, Reclaim Your Creative Life in a Too Busy World, Rodsky explores the cross-section between the science of creativity, productivity, and resilience. Described as the antidote to physical, mental, and emotional burnout, Rodsky aims to inspire a new narrative around the equality of time and the individual right to personal time choice that influences sustainability and lasting change on a policy level. Rodsky was born and raised by a single mom in New York City and now lives in LA with her husband Seth and their 3 children, and she's also my cousin.
Yeah.
Learn more Learn more about Fair Play and Unicorn Space at fairplaylife.com or follow her on Instagram at Eve Rodsky and at fairplaylife. Welcome, Eve.
Oh my God. Thank you for reading that whole mouthful. You're amazing. And I'm so glad we're doing this. Not only you, one of my favorite relatives, but I've loved the movement you've created in terms of holistic living. And I'm just so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, isn't it cool how it kind of merged with what you turned into?
Yes.
And that's what I wanted to start off with is where did this all come from, being a lawyer, Harvard graduate, into and it's sort of sad to say, developing this groundbreaking realization about fair play in the home.
Well, such a great question. You mentioned the blueberries breakdown, but Beth, as you know, because you know me personally, this all started from a text that Seth sent me in 2011. So I've been doing this a long time now. And that text said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." But what I think is important for your listeners to understand about that text was the context in which it was received by me, because it wasn't just a grocery comment. What it was if you can help me picture the scene in 2011 when I received the "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries" text. I was racing to pick up my son, who was a toddler, at a toddler transition program that lasts in America. Those programs last like 7 minutes. I was trying to start my own business because I had been recently I had opted out. I'll just say I was opted out of the workforce, sort of pushed out of the corporate workforce for asking for accommodations like breastfeeding in a pumping room, as you've talked about before on your show, how hard it is for working mothers. And so that was the context. I had started my own company. I had a contract in my lap that I was trying to mark up. I was racing to get my kid. I had gifts for a newborn baby to return in the backseat of my car. And so it is a breast pump, probably, I remember sort of a breast pump, I think on the passenger seat of the car or on the floor. And in the midst of that chaos, Seth sends me this text. And Beth, what I remember about that day, because it's one of those core memories, I guess they call it from Inside Out, sadness, a blue core memory, according, I think, from Pixar would say. But I remember of that day was just sobbing in my car. And in LA, we don't take traffic lightly. So for me to pull over and not be on time to pick up my toddler, things must have been really, really bad. And they were. And the things I was thinking as I was crying on that side of the road were, how did I become the default gray version, or I call it the she fault, for literally every single household and domestic task for my family? and especially the cognitive labor, the thinking about everything, not just the doing. And on top of it, um, how was I going to get out of this?
Right.
You know, at that point, I just felt like this was unsustainable for me. And that realization was incredibly scary because it meant either I was going to recreate what my mother did, which was basically, you know, she got that her groove back by court ordered custody, by
Hmm.
having, you know, some time back for herself, or I was going to have very, very serious conversations with Seth that I wasn't ready to have. And that is the context in which I started to put my research hat on, because I'm a lawyer and a researcher by nature, and start to understand what was happening to me. And it turns out, the spoiler alert, it wasn't just me. That this is the same shit, different decade. That what has been happening to me has been happening to women since the Industrial Revolution, and I just wanted people to know that they weren't alone.
I think that's so, you said so much in that. And one is that women feel like they're alone. Isn't that crazy how we feel like we're alone in this?
Yeah.
And your relationship with your spouses and your kids is unique in that nature.
Well, I love that question. I mean, I love that comment because that's intentional, Beth. Because what
Mm.
I've learned is that this system doesn't happen by accident. Women doing the unpaid labor of society while also being expected to contribute money is not empowerment, right? It's exploitation. And I found that out in 2011 that people had been talking about this. In fact, we had a name for it, Beth. It had been called the second shift in the 90s, where this sociologist warned us
Mm.
that, you know, if we enter marriages and we don't figure this out, we're going to have a lot of resentment, you know, as women, and we're going to get sick physically and mentally. It's been called the mental load. It's been called emotional labor. But I want to tell you that the term I love the most is, and I found it, it was in a 1986 article. So back to the same shit, different decade, where there was a woman named Arlene Kaplan Daniels, a sociologist who's now dead, but she argued that invisible work is the best way to call women's work because if you don't make it visible, then women still have to do it, and it won't be valued, which is
Mm.
what we want. Because if we paid women for the invisible work that they did, even if you did it minimum wage, not even the opportunity cost of what an hour of, say, being a lawyer is, or an hour of, you know, consulting for you is, if you just did it on minimum wage for both of us, we would be earning 180 to $200,000 a year, and that's
Probably
just
for
minimum
one kid.
wage for one kid.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So we would be millionaires.
Mm.
And so to convince women that they should do this work has been very much a part of the plan for how certain people stay in power. And I think that's how you know that it makes sense to teach people that they're alone. Because if I can't tell you, Beth, or if I'm embarrassed to share that I'm mad at Seth, or God forbid, we don't talk about our partners. He's a great guy. He doesn't pick
Mhm.
up the kids. He doesn't help me at all. He expects I do everything, but he's a great guy, right? We always have to. I see so many women doing that, you know, making these excuses for these very, very, very tricky situations that they find themselves in. And I feel like we have to do that because if we didn't, we would collapse.
Right.
Or we'd have to give women, as you've been doing, the power to see a different route. And Beth, that's why I think you've become one of my favorite relatives, because you give people a narrative and a path that doesn't look necessarily the way that maybe you were supposed to design your life. And you tell people it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you just mentioned, you get to this point where it becomes too much.
It's too much.
It's, I mean, burnout isn't, doesn't even feel so much the right word,
Right.
because you're alive. Like, you're not burnt out. You're just feeling like, is it, it's surreal a little.
It's absolutely, it's almost like modern art. You know, you feel, I feel like exactly burnout, even though I use that word because people understand what it is. I think it's more like if you look at a Picasso painting of a woman and you're expecting to see like someone that looks like Mona Lisa or normal, and then you see she's just like pieces of like triangles and squares. Like,
Yeah.
it's like surreal that you almost have to laugh. I think that's what they say in Yiddish, right? Like crying through yashigas or something. Like basically, I feel like it's a very Jewish thing to say we like cry through tears,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
There is a different narrative, and really the fair play and unicorn space movement, the two books that I wrote, one fair play being about empowering women outside the home so that also we have to invite men into their full power in the home so
Mm.
that we can empower women to come out of the home. The second piece to this puzzle, though, was something that was very alarming to me, Beth, which is that when I started to ask women who they were besides being a parent, a partner, and or a professional, most women in our surveys over 10 years, Beth, it's better now, I think, because we have people like you and TikTok and the fair play movement. But when I started this in 2011, I started to do my own research and I asked women, what are you allowed to be? The three P's are all I got. I'm allowed to be a parent. I'm allowed to wear my kid's neck or, initials around my neck, not mine. I'm allowed
Mm.
to be a partner, support my husband in, or, any other type of partnership. But typically affects a lot of, women married to men. So that's what I'm talking about primarily. I can help my husband grow his business and of course not get any credit for it. And then I'm allowed to be a professional. Like my partner likes when I bring money in.
Mm.
So I was like, well, what about the fact that you used to be a skier? What about the fact that you love to be a performer? What
Mm-hmm.
happened to your love um, of acrobatics? Like the
Mm-hmm.
trapeze, like our cousin Jessica, who like loved trapeze and she just didn't do it for 10 years. What you want to go be in the circus? Like, where are all those things? And women were laughing because it was so absurd for them to think that they could say, my name is Beth and I'm a parent and a trapeze artist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just doesn't, it's not how women are conditioned to be. If we're not in those three roles, we're typically incredibly guilty, again, which is by design.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's that if they decide to be the trapeze artist, what are people going to say about them? And
Correct.
suddenly they don't care about their family because they're also a trapeze artist. And how can they possibly also give time to their family? And that means they must also be having an affair with the trapeze coach because why else would a woman want to be there? Like
Exactly. Yep.
the spiral, which has happened to me, goes so far beyond I happen to just really enjoy trapeze and that's it.
Absolutely.
It could be period, end of sentence. And yet they have to rationalize in their mind why in a world a woman would want to do this or can be this and still be a mom and a great spouse.
But you know why, right? Because women we're complicit in our own oppression, Beth.
Well, we talk about each other too.
Yeah, well, that's it. Because we're complicit in our own oppression. You can't be in an oppressive system, Beth, without being complicit in it. And again, I'm never blaming women
Mm-hmm.
because when you are in a system that doesn't benefit you, you do anything to survive. So sometimes it is that judgment against the person who does the thing outside of your community because you're not doing it. And so you would want to be doing it. And so what is judgment, right? Judgment is just, to me, it's a mirror.
Mm.
It's a mirror,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is. And again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a lawyer. And so ultimately, what my books do is give you programs and systems. Because behavior design is what lawyers do, right? We want people to stop at a stop sign, we pass a law. I'm not a psychologist, but what I did, and I focus in the practical. So how do you get to that next step where you can be the trapeze person and not give a fuck what other people think about you? I think is important is to understand that when there is a system in place that allows you to do only certain things, being a parent, a partner, and a professional, it's going to feel subversive to be outside that box. So let's even talk about your love of boxing or what I've seen
Mm-hmm.
you, and I love watching your content when you're boxing. Typically, if somebody, and I'm not talking about you, but typically in our research, if somebody was going to take up a sport, it would sound sort of like, well, I have to do this. I'm on a health and wellness journey. I have to do this for my health. again, where I would rather hear people, even if that's the why you're doing it, I'd rather hear people say, I'm boxing, end of sentence. I don't need
Yeah,
to know your why.
I get it.
And the reason why there's a why is because we're so scared and there's guilt. And you said like we'd be judged otherwise. So here's another cool tip, and we'll get practical. But one of the things I want your audience to do, I'd love for them to have some homework. And I'd love for them to answer this question to you, to me, in our DMs. When can you, and I'll ask you this, Beth, too, because you've evolved a lot, and your journey has been very inspiring to me. So you probably have an answer to this, and I'd love to know your answer. But this was really hard for most women to answer in our studies. I would ask them, I need to know the last day. When was the last day that you can tell me the most important thing you did that day was outside of your roles as a parent, a partner, and or a professional?
For me, thankfully, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, so that's why I want to hear, because I want to inspire people. So I let you know that a super majority of women, going back to 2011, we started surveying people, can't answer that question. There is not a day that they remember where they can say the most important thing they did that day was outside of their roles as a parent, a partner, and or a professional. So I would love for you to inspire us. And then I'll tell you one of mine too. But can you give me a day where the most important thing you did that day was outside of those three P's?
I think the clarification though is I can't really ever take a full day, but I take time in my day very
Yeah, okay.
intentionally.
No, but it's the most important thing of the day where you're like, this was the most important thing I did that day. It could be 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah. And everything, let's say, led up to it is I joined 2 softball leagues this summer.
Oh my God.
And not just one, but 2. So maybe one we could rationalize, like, oh, you could kind of stick that into your schedule. But the second one that they actually drafted me without asking to the more competitive league this year. And I said, how could I say no? I'm turning 40. I'm going to do this for as long as I can. And I was stressing over it majorly. And I said, you know what? I need to do this for myself. It's a big birthday year. I'm going to do it. Anyway, so Sunday night, even I had an all-star game. I was asked to the all-stars. And my son,
God.
yes.
How do
and
I
my
not know this?
Oh, I post a little bit. I tried to do
Yes,
this like TikTok trend with posting some softball.
Yeah,
but
I need to get better on TikTok. You need to help me with
that. Yeah, I will. So my son was actually playing his playoffs in baseball like around the time, and I just to give people context that this isn't easy. But luckily, oddly, what are the odds he's playing in the same field I was going to play? So I get in all my gear a little bit earlier. I handle some kids home. I take one child with me because you can't leave them all home. You got to bring someone with you. I took care of dinner, everything before to lead up to it, meaning to take time for yourself is a lot of planning and prepping to lead up to it. You have to be your intention has to be like, well, I'm going and I need to be there. And then I went to the game. I saw his game. I got him a ride home. Meaning mommy's staying for my all-star game. You're welcome to, but he actually had something. Got him a ride home with a friend that I texted prior, double-checked there. Saw his game. At one point was going back and forth in the game. And he was great. He was fine. He saw it. And then I played the all-star game and my daughter came with me, and then we went home late. So
yes. Oh my God. There's so much power in that story. I mean, and emotion. Like I got really emotional, and which is weird because you think I interview, we've interviewed tens of thousands, probably over 100,000 people at this point. And 15, I think we're translated now in 16 different countries. And I feel like I want to take pens out and take notes for what you just said. And I'll tell you why. First of all, exactly. The intention in it, the beauty, the gift you gave to your son, the gift he will have of knowing that his mother did that for herself is, you can't even understand how important that is. The gift to your longevity, because we now know for women, being outside these roles, what I call this unicorn space, is actually really important to our mental health. Yeah. So I want to just tell you 2 things about that. And then I want to ask you, because I need to stay on the softball thing for a minute. So one, I want to just say what's so beautiful about you and what the softball story told me was that in my research, again, as a lawyer, I wanted to ask people who are adjacent, because a lot of people who help me with fair play, we have these facilitators. A lot of them are psychologists. It's amazing. We work very well together. So I went to all of them for my second book, Unicorn Space, which is like this baseball. It doesn't have a unicorn space is just something that's mythical, magical, feels really good to
I
do.
love it.
It doesn't exist like the unicorn unless you reclaim it. So that let's just for now it's softball. You could have a many, and I hope I gift to your women, your listeners, that they have many in their lives. But for the thing that I think struck me the most in my research was that I found out what true mental health is. I asked enough people and they came up with the same answer, which is mental health is not happiness. What mental health is having appropriate emotions at the appropriate time, yet having the ability and strength to weather it. So I know, and we know that the ability and strength for you to weather your appropriate emotions, whether they're rage, anger, stress, as a mother of 6 kids, will be better weathered because you have softball in your life. It's just hands down. So to weather the storms of life, which is mental health, we have to have things to cope. If you don't have softball and unicorn space, then people are going to be coming to you for your other career, because what we usually cope with are hedonic pursuits, emotional eating, emotional drinking, edibles, drug use, binge watching television. So you will cope, but I'd way rather people pay the attention. So that's one thing I want to say about mental health. But number 2 is I think I would love to do a little exercise with you, because this is our second homework assignment for your listeners.
Okay.
So the first one is answering the question, what is the most important thing you've done in a day outside of your roles? Similar to Beth, how she did that. And if you don't have one, that's totally fine. You can think of what you would love to do in that time and then play the same second game with us. So this is what I want. This is the hard part, Beth, because this is how people start to get a practice. Not by saying, I'm going to play softball again. It doesn't work that way. It works if you have your why. So this is what I want from you. I want you, when you were in your all-star game, or you dropped off your son, or he's watching you, or you, whatever point that you can remember of that day, whether you're in your gear, what position do you play?
Catcher.
Okay, that's okay. So you're in your whatever outfit, or your
a lot of gear.
You have your glove. I want to know if you can come up with 5 values that it brings up for you. And if you don't have them, we can end up reading a list of values that I have in my book, but I think we could do it together. Give me the values that it brings up for you.
Give me one example.
So I'll give you a one.
Okay.
I'm going to give you presence, because I'm not sure that you can be a catcher if you're not present. Like I don't.
Is that also the same as focus, or is that a different one?
Yes, like focus, presence.
A focus.
Like present.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's use focus.
Okay.
So focus on the present, but focus is a great one.
Yes. Okay.
I
Focus.
believe that you're there in the moment. You're waiting for that ball. You really, or when you're about to hit, it's hard to be like, oh, I wonder what my kids want for, school supplies tomorrow. You have
I feel that.
So focus, I'm going to give you is one. That's what I heard from what you said.
And presence, focus. Yeah, same thing. Strength.
Joy?
Strength is another one.
Strength. Okay. I love that. So tell me more about that value.
Well, it could be physical or emotional strength. But literally I'm feeling very strong. I'm feeling strong in my body. Like, I don't even mean like as a fit thing, just as like a presence thing.
Love it. Focus, strength. Okay.
Yeah. Empowerment, because I feel like a beast.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Especially when you get like a play, and you even a good play, by the way, that I don't get, but was a really good play. You feel really empowered to like go to the next play, and you
I
take that off the field.
Okay. So empowerment. And then can I ask you a question about that empowerment? Yeah. Is it also related to the fact, is it a competitive empowerment? Like I got the other team, or is it more like, I love that I did something for my team? Like what type of
great question. Cause I argue with people when they hear me sometimes speak softball. They're like, oh, wow, you're really competitive. I said, I'm competitive because I want to win, but it's more what you said about myself. Like it's I'm empowered for myself and my team versus, I want to beat the other person. It's less about the other people. Yes. Cause I want them to win too in the back of my mind.
Well, so then I'm going to add one more value then. So I have focus, strength, empowerment, and then connection.
Yes, so that's
Because,
what I wanted to say
yeah,
about kind of like teamwork aspect. I love the team and I love the league I'm in because it's such female like
I love
connection
that.
and team empowerment. I think it's a major part of why I do it because you have your job, you have this, and you don't have the interactions with women in such a supporting environment.
Oh
So
my
you get
God.
all these values in that supportive network of
Okay,
teamwork.
done. So we got 5. So we have
Oh wow,
focus.
I could have kept going, Eve.
I love it. We have focus, strength, empowerment, connection, and support.
Oh, and that made
So
me feel so good.
I love these values for you so much, and I'll tell you why. Because even as wonderful as you are, I bet you if I just asked you before we started this podcast, like, what are your values? Just knowing how great of a parent you are, and makes me tear up because you're a wonderful mother. I
Mm.
bet you maybe would have started with like family, friends, because I'm your family,
Mhm.
love, whatever. I mean, not
Yeah,
that
like
those
I'm a
are
good friend.
friendship. Yeah, not
Yeah.
that those are, again, I call them sort of the boring values because we all want them. Like, God willing, we all have those things we need. But I think it's better, and it's hard for us because we're sort of conditioned into those role values, the friendship, the love, the family, the sort of the obligation values, that it's sometimes hard to find our actual values. So sometimes if you back into it by the starting with the activity, I actually think this menu is a lot of the things you do in your life. So what I
Mm.
would say to you is that I'd love for this to be your checklist for the month, or at least for the next 6 months, and then you can switch your values up. It doesn't have to be static. But I'd love for you to ask yourself, say on Shabbat or whatever, a time when you have some time to focus, you can say to yourself, Beth, did I get to really focus this week? Did I feel like present in my body this week?
Mm.
Did I get a chance to feel strong this week? Did I get a chance to feel empowered this week? Did I get a chance for true connection this week? Did I get a chance to feel supported this week? I
I
would love
am
for you just to check in on those, because
I
it doesn't
we
have to
why
just
are we
be,
both crying on this
I know,
podcast?
I know, I know. But I,
I
I,
think that
I
was
know
so
you're doing this for
special.
people. You're doing this for people. And I just want to make sure that you get those values for yourself. So in the times when maybe it's not softball, you still deserve focus, strength, empowerment, connection, and support.
It's it's not only right what you said, I never had a tangible way. I like you're incredible, no wonder why you're a best-selling author. Okay?
Mm.
Because you just created like a tangible way to do this. So everything you were sharing, I was thinking when it comes, let's say, to emotional eating, being a dietitian, helping people in practice. And I have other podcasts about that related to, well, what could you do instead of eating if it's not making you feel good in the moment? And women would just look at me blank. Like, I don't
Right.
even know what I like doing for myself.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I want. And I have to try to encourage them to practice, journal, write things, remember things they like to do when they were younger, whatever it was. But I never did what you just did. That
Well,
was
you can.
incredible.
You
I'm
can. And that's
going
what's
to
so great.
now, but I'm
I
saying you
want you
went
to. Oh,
backwards.
thank you. Yes.
It's still the first step to find things that you either remembered you enjoy or saw something that intrigued you or whatever.
Yes.
Keep trying, trying,
Yes.
trying different things. But then once you do it and you have the feeling after, which is a lot of what motivation is and all those aspects, is you have to actually do it in order to feel like keeping on doing it. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things. So I do the softball and then to kind of work, and I know I enjoyed it because obviously I'm showing up with my 6 kids, or who knows where they are. But I then take that step back and think of the values you felt, and that's your blueprint. That's your blueprint for the week.
And it can change. But for
Right.
now, it's your blueprint, because I see it in your other aspects of your work too. And that's why I just want that to be a model for the people listening, to say that it's sometimes hard, as Beth said, to get and to remember who we were. That's why my second book is called Find Your Unicorn Space, because the book is not called I want you to be a unicorn or I want you to be a softball player. It's I want people to find the space to be able to reflect, like you said, either back or forward. And as Beth knows, growing up, like, I didn't have a lot of fun time in my childhood. I lived in sort of a shitty neighborhood. I took care of a disabled brother. My mother worked nights, so for me, going backwards is never really that helpful. But for me, it's like, what do I love now? Or what can what do I, it's like Taylor Swift, like, we're all in our eras. And
Mm.
so for me, I was in a very cerebral era. I spent the past 10 years literally researching this issue so that nobody else could be a better expert at the gender division of labor. And now, Beth, it's in the world. And I think we had like some crazy amount of billions of TikTok impressions because people are using fair play and making it their own. It's like launched, it's like a baby, it's like a teenager in the world. And so now that I can be an empty nester a little bit with fair play, I'm thinking about what's my next era. And I'm very inspired by your journey. I want to enter an athlete journey because
Ooh.
I never had that ability growing up. I grew up in a, like I said, in a really shitty sort of housing project. There was nothing, there was no greenery, there was not a lot of sports. Our little league team played in the Conag power plant, which was
Oh,
like
wow.
disgusting and probably leads, we got a notice saying like check for lung cancer if you live near the power
Oh,
plant. So
God.
there was never anything athletic about where I grew up. And so I think I'm inspired to move to, and that's the third thing I want to just say, because I know your podcast is, I'm crying still about you. But the third thing I want to say that we found in the research, as same as I just said, I want to move to more of this new journey, is that if someone still feels stuck, if they're like, well, I wouldn't even know where to start this exercise because I don't know what's intriguing or what I like, I think it's the best place to start. But I would say move to a third area because I think this is where people get stuck. People say the noun, Beth. So this was something we noticed a lot in our research and our surveys. People would say, I'm not a softball player. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a writer. But can you still be a person who plays softball?
Yep.
Even a 2-year-old is a person who plays softball. Can you be a person who writes? If you have a pen in your hand and you write down a sentence, you're a person who writes. So I think it's important to start verbifying our life, if that makes sense, as opposed to using the noun, because then it allows for more flexibility. That's my last point.
And more openness and more openness to take that step into it. Absolutely. Because I want to get more into tennis and I'm really like moving towards it. But I am very careful to not say I'm not this, or even for me in my practice, it's like picky eaters. I don't like this. I don't like just there's no don't, there's no not, there's just openness and curiosity and
That's
shifts.
right.
I love that.
That's right. And I think that if we could gift 3 values to your community, again, remembering yours were focus, strength, empowerment, connection, and support. I think what you just said, one of the values I'd love to gift people is just curiosity. I think what ends up when you get, I'm thinking back to that, the judgment stuff and what happened, that sort of spiral we were just talking about, what, happened to you, what happens to me when people are like, wow, this woman must hate her husband. She wrote a whole book about him.
That's great, by the way.
But, I think it's fundamentally because people, for their own reasons, have a lack of curiosity about others, about what's possible. And so that's what I would love to gift everybody as your first value. Yes, we'll gift you family, friendship, love, all those roles. We're here for it. But start to think about, how you can be curious. Like answer that question. I wonder. And I remember I said that to somebody once early in my research. What do you wonder about? And this woman said to me, well, I wonder why my baby's poop is yellow. And I'm like, no, not that type of wonder. Not that type of curiosity. Like, what do you daydream about? What do you wonder about? And I think that's what's so fun because you can literally start by just, like you said, that curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay. Well, that's something great to leave everyone with. I want to thank you so much for coming on, and we could have like a part 2. I mean, that was hard enough to get us on a part 1, but I want a part 2.
No, we'll definitely do a part 2. And I think the part 2 that I'd love to explore is sort of why. Why is it that we end up in a place where we wear our kids' initials around our neck?
And not our own. That was crazy. Oh my God, you're right. That's it. I'm getting a Beth necklace.
That's it.
Right,
you have
now.
to. I wear an Eve necklace. I wear an E all the time. And even Anna, who's 7, my daughter, says, my mom doesn't wear our names. She wears
but like you said, it's setting a great example for them too.
It's the example. It's the same as showing up at the softball league. And by the way, we know kids who see their parents in their own active identities do really well because they're not narcissists. They understand that the world doesn't revolve around them. You're not a bad parent if you want to do this. You can burn that guilt and shame because, as we said in the beginning of this podcast, it was designed to keep you in the 3 Ps, parent, partner, professional. That guilt is not helpful to you at all.
Oh, I love that. Okay, well, we can continue to follow you on Instagram at Eve Brodsky and at Fair Play Life to see book number 3. I don't know, is that coming out?
Yeah, well, I'm starting to do some research for that after my athlete year, hopefully. But
I love that.
A lot of issues in the workplace that we have to deal with. So that's probably going to be book 3.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Bye, Beth.
Bye.
All right, talk to you soon.
Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nourished by Beth, or listen on Spotify at the Secrets to Mindful Health podcast.